Hello, everybody. Before we begin today's show, I have a quick question for you. Have you picked up your free ebook yet? No, it's not a joke. I've actually been talking about this for weeks about Dr. Sargent's new book, The Do It Messy Approach, the step-by-step guide for instructional designers and online learning developers. And this book is finally up and live. And right now, you can go to Amazon and actually pick up the Kindle version for free. It's an excellent book for those who want to have practical tips and advice about instructional design. And of course, the way that it's written with that type of a step-by-step formatting, it's extremely helpful and it's very easy to follow along with. And as I've said before too, this book, in my opinion, is for anybody. Whether you're a veteran, you've been doing this for years and you just want to hear another perspective from another instructional designer, or if you're a newbie and you are just learning about instructional design right now, you're trying to figure things out, certainly this book can help either party when it comes to instructional design. And kind of a surprise, because I didn't tell too many people, I was waiting for the book to actually come out, but I wrote the forward for the book. So if you've been enjoying my writings from my book or from my blog, that same nerdy rambling style still certainly applies. So be sure to check out the forward for the book, and of course, check out the book overall in its entirety by reading Amazon's #1 new release book for curriculum and lesson planning. You can go down into the show notes to find the hyperlink that will take you directly to that page on Amazon. So hey, be sure to pick up your copy today. And now, let's start the show. Hello, Learning Nerd Nation, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you are going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I am a senior instructional designer and program manager at MIT. I'm also the author of the book called What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. And I make a lot of content on the internet all about instructional design because my passion is this field. I absolutely love what it is that I do, and I consider it my purpose to be able to help you along your own instructional design journey. Whether you're a newbie and you just heard about instructional design, you're trying to figure out how to transition over into this field, or you're a veteran and you've been doing this for years and you just want to pick up a couple of different types of tips and tricks to make your own learning experiences better, all are welcomed on in to this show. And of course, you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. If you're watching this video, you can tell that this might be a bit of a different type of podcast episode because, folks, I have not yet had a fully all type of encompassing video podcast combination yet so far, but that changes today. I was looking to be able to bring on a guest who would be willing to do a different type of a video interview, and luckily for all of us, I found an amazing guest. I'm going to be talking about him a little bit later on, because today's episode is also very unique in nature because it was inspired from your questions. A bunch you wrote into me via Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and of course over via email at luke@drlukehobson.com, and you asked me about your pressing instructional design questions. And I gotta say, folks, these were awesome questions, such as, what about if your organization doesn't do the A and D and ADDIE and you're just left to die? What exactly do you do? What if you're giving a type of an opportunity to be able to come on board as an institution and be able to train professors in e-learning? Should you actually take that job? Now, of course, we need to be able to talk about teachers because lots of teachers have questions pertaining to instructional design. We'll be covering about what exactly do you need in order to make this happen as far as for credentials, first steps, what can you use as part of your pieces for your portfolio? And the last question, which is super interesting and very learning nerd heavy, is talking about, is Bloom's taxonomy the best way to be able to measure effectiveness of online discussion board postings? Really interesting stuff. Can't wait to dive on into this one. And of course, to be able to answer your questions, I wanted to bring on a guest who I respect very much so inside of the instructional design space, and I wanted to hear more from his perspectives about these very same types of questions. So allow me to introduce Tim McKean. He's an instructional designer over at Arizona State University. You've probably seen his types of postings before on LinkedIn and Facebook. He is extremely active in all of the groups online, and I can't wait. I'm so glad he was the first guest to be able to want to come in and do this type of a video podcast and answer all of your questions. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Here is our Q&A episode with the one and the only Tim McKean. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Luke.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. I can't wait to do this. This one is going to be really cool. But before we dive on in, Tim, could you just please introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Great. I'm Tim McKean. I'm a senior instructional designer for the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts at Arizona State University.
And anything else, man? You do a lot more than that. Like, I know it's your
I do
title,
other things too, but that's why I'm here. Yeah. No, I also do, I freelance audiobook and e-learning narration, and I've been a teacher in a past life, musician, French horn. So there's several things back there in my past, but right now it's ADDIE.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I was going to say, because Tim, I've known you for a while because of different Facebook groups and chatting about various things about instructional design over the years. So this is really cool because I know we've talked before about coming on to the podcast, and now you're getting the super uber version of the podcast / YouTube channel version, which is really cool for us to be able to do. So for the folks at home, I know that you've been listening to some of the podcast episodes that had the Q&A episode type of variety, and that is what we're going to be doing today. But what I always kept on thinking about in the background was, wouldn't it be really cool to bring on another instructional designer, get their perspectives, and then the two of us could actually tackle and go through the questions and answers together. And as I was thinking about this, Tim, you actually reached out saying, hey, hint, hint, I would love to come on the show. And I was like, there we go. So that's what this episode is going to be, folks at home. So you have the full podcast episode, but also you are going to have this YouTube version where you can actually go and watch as well. So this is what we are going to do. Tim and I, right now, we have 4 questions that you sent over to us via Facebook, LinkedIn, and then you can always send over a question to my email at luke@drlukehobson.com. But that's where all of these came from. So Tim, you ready to start diving on in and answering some questions and helping out some people?
Absolutely. And I'm really curious to see if we agree on these things or not. You know, what our different perspectives happen to be.
I mean, I hope that we don't, which is kind of funny. It's just like I don't want to start a debate, obviously, but at the same time, if all the perspectives are the same every single time, and it's just like, we're just copying each other. So right. I really hope that we actually have a variety. Not like we're going to go like fist fighting over Zoom, but I think that there's some really interesting takes here. So let's dive on into the first question. Yeah. So Tim, this is what it says. It says, hey, Luke, I've been following your YouTube channel for a while, and thanks for sharing the knowledge. I live in Brazil, and I'm a graduate in instructional design. Here I face a challenge that I don't know is a problem only in Brazil or worldwide. Businesses here don't do needs analysis at all. ADDIE means die. The A and the D steps just simply don't exist. They give the solution for the instructional design to make a course out of it. My question: what's the best way to approach leaders that don't want an analysis or design steps? I'm asking this because it looks like Brazil is a decade late in the instructional design field, and maybe there is already a good approach to manage those situations. Thanks again. So, Tim, I'll let you take the first question. What do you say to this one?
Well, one of the first things that came to mind is that adage that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? That we tend to see a solution that fits our skill set. And it sounds like in this situation, this company maybe has instructional designers and trusts them. And so, you know, they'll see a problem. They say, oh, we'll make a course to solve that problem. And so, you know, that may be a thing. In some ways, that's a compliment, right? It's I know that you guys can solve problems, and here's a problem that we have. So, you know, go solve it. But the other aspect I was thinking of this one is that as an ID, and I know you've talked about this before, as an ID, relationship management is a huge part of what we do. And so there is an aspect of it is my job when someone comes to me and says, hey, I've got this problem, here's how I want to solve it, that I will say, sure, let's pursue that path. But have you also considered this, or have you thought about this tool, or have you? So it's easy to make suggestions, and whenever possible, making those kind of suggestions really dig into why. What's the benefit of this other thing? Because if your company says they want a course on something, but you think like a job aid would solve the problem, or a simple YouTube video, then that's actually going to be cheaper for them, right? So you could say, hey, we could solve this same problem at a fifth the cost if we tried something like this. And that's going to get their attention, right? A fifth the cost, that's a good idea. So that's another thing too. If you have an idea, definitely present it as a suggestion or I really hate passive voice when I'm writing, but when I'm working with SMEs, that's how it is. Have you considered this? Or you might think about this, or I've seen other companies use this tool. And so you can always throw out those suggestions and always anchor it with a reason why it's going to be beneficial to them to think about that tool.
Now, when you were thinking about answering this, one of the things that I saw right away that I was just like, I don't think I actually agree with that, is that he was wondering if this was a Brazil problem or if it's an anywhere problem. I think it's an anywhere problem.
It's
Do you
an
think
anywhere
it's
problem.
Okay, yeah.
No, they're definitely not a decade behind a decade ago. If you had IDs, that was great,
Right, exactly. I know. It's just like so many of the people of the world are finally learning about who we are and what it is that we do now. So it's just like, no, I don't think that they are really far behind. And for the most part, Tim, I definitely agree with many of the things that you said. What actually came to mind was this idea about how instructional designers can be seen as order takers. And I know when I talked with Heidi Kirby a long time ago and she came on the podcast, she was talking about how she was just like, you can't just like take L&D and assume like you can just go and order up a pizza and then to say that I want this and this and this and then like have it delivered to you.
Right.
Like, that's not how this works. There needs to be a lot
off the menu. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's like, no, there needs to be a lot more pertaining to that. We are simply not just order takers here. So if I was in this person's shoes, I would actually have like two different strategies around how I would approach this. It definitely comes back to relationship management for either strategy that they do talk about. But what really comes to mind is, and I'm not sure if you remember this, Tim, like this quote that was back, I think it was like the quote was like back in 2019 or something. It was on LinkedIn everywhere. You couldn't escape it. But it was basically a conversation between a CFO and a CEO. And the CFO talks to the CEO and says, what happens if we invest in developing our people when they leave us? And the CEO says, well, what happens if they don't and they stay? And that's what this kind of reminds me of, is going to be like, what exactly are we doing here? Because we could get into some dangerous waters by not being able to properly conduct research and go through with these types of motions. And also at the same time, too, we can try to think about this as far as we're trying to highlight an example about what could go really well. So we have two potential strategies of like, what would be the dangers, then the pitfalls if we don't do things correctly? And also what can we actually make as like a champion example if we crush it and things go absolutely well? And to me, this depends upon the person who we're working with. So whether it's your boss, the subject matter expert, whoever it really is, I want to be able to know a little bit more about them and see what drives them just from having these conversations and really just being attentive and listening to exactly what really excites them, what makes them tick, what makes them kind of nervous. Because if you can use and highlight examples talking about, let's say, for highlighting the successes as far as for pertaining to doing everything the right way, and then showcasing about how the employees are incredibly happy, they leave positive reviews after reviews, the place gets voted as like #1 place to work because of culture and awesomeness, and the Glassdoor reviews are like off the charts and shows that the ROI is just incredible. Well, then we can go that way as far as for saying these solutions helped with what the L&D team did. Or you can do the opposite as far as we're saying, look at how these people did not do things correctly, and they just pitched idea after idea, and they went nowhere, basically seeing what sticks up against the wall, and now people hate it. The culture is abysmal. People are quitting. Lawsuits are flying out. So whatever would potentially make that person move in that right direction to try to get them for you to be able to actually go and pitch new ideas, conduct your real research, get your amount of time that you really do need, I would kind of try either one, potentially whatever might work. So that's what I was kind of thinking about when I read that question.
Yeah. And another thing to think about too is I'm sensing a little frustration on the questioner's part here, but maybe that just might be your role in the group. Having had multiple experiences, I've worked at a small community college, and I've worked now at ASU, a very behemoth of a university. And one of the things that I've experienced is that just because you're not doing the A&D portions of ADDIE doesn't mean they're not being done somewhere. Oftentimes, especially in a much larger institution, by the time it gets to the ID, there have been focus groups and maybe even a year of meetings and things like that, doing these other kind of processes of deciding, is this where we want to invest and things like that. So I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening in your situation, but that could be what's happening in your situation. And there are those times where we are just the end of a line rather than the whole process.
So then to that point, what suggestions would you have for them to try to be able to get in the know, to meet those right people and to hear that information instead of getting it way at the end of the process, as far as for them being at the beginning of the process? Any steps you would advise from there?
That's networking, relationship building. It's still back to that first answer of make suggestions. Once people start seeing you as a person that has ideas and that has good suggestions and has good reasons for them, then you'll slowly get brought into those meetings earlier in the process.
Yeah, it's definitely networking. One of the things I should have actually warned you about, Tim, is that I ask a lot of questions. I'm asking questions that you didn't have prepared ahead of time, so I'm going to throw stuff at you. But it's because I really respect your opinion for how much you've been able to do in this field, so I'm always really curious about your insights. But that's the exact same thing I would have said about as far as for networking, as far as for really being able to also, one of the activities that I have some of my students do from leadership programs, which is really interesting, is trying to be able to create a stakeholder map as far as we're seeing who in the company has the key decision, who is the person that talks to whom on lunch, who is the influencer. And sometimes they're actually people who you would never ever guess. I can confidently tell you that if I have a question about how my organization runs, I don't go directly to the senior director of the blah blah blah. I actually start first with the administrator who I see in the morning as I'm walking by in the front desk and saying hi, because they know everyone. They talk to every person. They know every person's kids' names and their dog's name and who goes to. So it's that person has the knowledge. I want to become best friends with that person because then I can learn so much more. And then you can figure out those right stakeholders and whatnot. So yeah, that is one tip that I learned a while ago. So I think we got this question down. So why don't we move on to question 2 and start to tackle that one. So this says, hey, Luke, thanks for connecting. I have seen some of your videos and wanted your advice. I have a proposal from a university for the role of instructional designer, and it's a new role to them. But they need me to train the professors to do basic e-learning themselves. Do you think this will work? And how is it working with faculty as subject matter experts and developers? Thank you. So this one, Tim, I have strong feelings on.
Yeah, go for it.
So you want me to tackle this one first? So what I was actually thinking about this is because I have actually done this before in the past life. So to answer the immediate question about do I think it can work? It can. It doesn't mean that's an absolute it's going to work, though, because you need to have the professors to be able to buy into this idea, which typically means that this whole new, potentially this could be a sweeping reform about how we're going to ask people to do this, where it needs to come from the senior level leadership from both sides of a story, from the instructional design department, as well as whoever is overseeing with these groups of instructors, whether it's going to be a team lead or whether these are full-time faculty members, and this is more like the dean from the department. If they're really serious about doing this, we need this buy-in, and we need this to be a actual big deal about how this is going to be new for training and learning, and this is going to be a whole new commitment and a whole new process. Because I had this happen when I worked at Northeastern University, where a lot of the professors who I was working with, it was their very first time that they were actually setting up courses in Blackboard, and they just had questions, and I mean questions upon questions, and it really did feel like it was herding cats at a number of times where I was like, oh my God, but also understanding that this kind of was just brought to their attention of hey, your course is going online, this is what you agreed to, but we need you to do a certain amount of steps. And it definitely took quite a bit of training for them to get comfortable with a learning management system, not even talking about like an authoring tool or something like that, but just like the basics as far as for saying that this is how you are going to be uploading your syllabus. Here's what a syllabus should actually contain. These are where you're going to be putting your different things as far as for PDFs. This is where the discussion board posts go. This is how you respond to discussion posts. Like, it became a full-blown training session over weeks and months to try to really get people to be able to do this. So that was just a learning management system, and it took me quite a bit of time. If you're asking somebody, because the questions talked about like e-learning and authoring tools, if we're going down the road, though, of like something way more complicated about diving on into Storyline or using like something like that, then we are really going to get into some tricky and trouble waters here, because I'm starting to get concerned about what the professors are going to think and what are their perspectives. Because if they say that they're already bending over backwards for their job, and then now it's expecting them to be a professor, a facilitator, an e-learning developer, and stuff like that, it's going to go poorly. It's not going to go well. And unfortunately, that resentment is going to go to you, the instructional designer. It's not going to go to the dean.
You're the face in front of them. Yeah.
You are the deliverer of the bad information. So you are going to get that hate, which obviously is not fair to you, but like, you're the one picking up the reins here. And in the question too, it said that instructional design is new to them in this organization, which already makes me feel like you're going to be at a disadvantage from a power standpoint and perspective within the hierarchy of the organization. No one's going to know who you are. Most likely, they have no clue about instructional design. And then here you are being like, so, hey, this is what we're going to do to make these courses better.
Right.
It can go along. It's something that could potentially get really tricky, and it might take a long period of time. And they may entirely dismiss the instructional designer. So once again, it can work, but it has to come from the right people. The right buy-in has to be established, and then the right training protocols need to come about. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So I took a little bit of a different approach here. This is a job This is a job that I would love to have. This is the way I prefer to work with faculty. And so my shorter answer is yes, can absolutely work, and it can be really enjoyable and really effective. And it might go back to someone even posted just this morning in one of the Facebook groups about this idea that people claiming that e-learning is just one thing, or that e-learning is, that ADDIE is just one thing, and it fits this very narrow definition. Instructional design is so many different things, and it sounds like in this case, what they're really wanting to hire is a professional development person, right? And if they can do that, then this is a great way to scale, and this is a great way to improve teaching and learning across your campus, improve the online teaching and learning at a larger scale. Because if you're just an ID that is like that end of the line person, or that's more into the e-learning development side, like you said, Storyline or developing Camtasia videos or things like that, then you have a capacity, right? You can develop 2, maybe 3 courses a term at a time. But if you're doing this kind of consult model, which is what I call it, maybe you can consult on 12 courses at a time, where you're meeting with faculty and saying, here's some training on the LMS. Here's how to make a more efficient discussion board. Here's a nice way to use Google Slides to make an interactive presentation. Now go do it. Now I meet with the next person. And so you're training them, you're giving them the tools, you're giving them the context of your experience, but then you're kind of sending them off to do their homework and to do the work. And I love it. I mean, that's my style. I like that idea of professional development, because now you're not only influencing that course that they're teaching, you're influencing every course they teach, because you've given them a new tool, or you've given them a new perspective. So yeah, if you're thinking of it from that perspective, if you're looking at it from a professional development, online teaching, coaching kind of position, then yeah, it can be very, very effective.
So in your opinion, if you're going to be potentially taking this job, because it sounds like this was like, it was in the conversational piece now, like it was just happening, they were going back and forth and things. One of the things that I would be really curious about from that person's standpoint is, what is their definition of success? Like, how do you know that I'm doing a good job as far as my performance evaluation? Because from my past experience of trying to be able to do this, I am confident in saying that it's going to be like only half will care the first year. And then eventually the second year, as more people tell other people, it's going to spread and grow, and your name will get out there, and instruction on design will be able to be talked a bit more about in a more highly favorable light. At the beginning, though, it's going to be kind of rough to see like, hey, people aren't listening to me. They're not doing what they say. Or maybe they will because the organization has said, we're doing this. Like, you have the authority, go do the thing. Would you be asking those questions, though, when you're like trying to go through that interview negotiation process?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there an institutional desire to improve? Is this being backed at the dean's office, at the director level, somewhere above? Or is this something that's being mandated on them that they're not interested in, right? If that's a very different thing, too. An analogy that comes to mind is like bicycling in a very high gear, right? If you're in a low gear, it's easy to get started. You can crank out work, but you have a maximum speed. You have a high gear, it starts slowly, but you can ramp and continue and continue to accelerate, right? And I see it a little bit that way too. And your comment to it may take some time to develop a rapport and develop, get your name around and things like that. I heard this phrase once, and it was in the context of accessibility, but I think it works just in general of professional development and in instructional design and e-learning development. This idea of taking a +1 approach. If each instructor I can work with, I can give them one thing to improve their course, and then they go do it. As soon as they see that improved their course, then they come back to me for more things. Whereas if I give them 10 things, and even if they only have time to implement one, they feel like they failed. And they feel frustrated because Tim gave me all these things and I wasn't able to do only half of them. So that's one of the things I've learned in this kind of coaching or this kind of consulting role, is to not overload with information, not overload with tasks or tools or skills, but it becomes my job to listen to their story, listen to their course, identify and do all those analytical things while they're talking to me and say, this is the one thing that I think will have the most impact in your course. Let's implement this, and then in the spring we can try something different, or and then let that evolve.
Makes sense. It makes sense, and to also make sure that I don't just leave a total negative spin on my prior life. Whenever they actually did do things, and then, as you said, they started to believe in themselves, the confidence came about, they stopped coming to me over time because they knew they could they felt confident enough to take the reins and say, I can do this. And then they came to me if there was real problems. But once they actually got trained, it was very satisfying to see that Professor so-and-so who's been at the institution for 50 years all of a sudden is talking about online learning in a positive light. Was really cool. That was... Yeah.
And as an instructional designer, you have the tools to be an excellent trainer, because you can model the things that you want them to use. So if you want them to use more interactive video, send them an interactive video of how to use their LMS. If you want them to be involved and have better discussion boards, start a Slack channel or start a discussion board where faculty can share ideas. I really like that idea of modeling the techniques that you want them to implement, and that way they're learning and they're learning about learning.
I dig it. What a nice, positive, happy feel to that one. But it's true. It's cool. All right. Let's go into question 3, because I feel like this one might be a long one because many, many people have questions on this. So here we go. So question 3 says, hey, Luke, I've been a teacher for about 9 to 10 years, and I'm looking to transition into instructional design. I am trying to figure out where to start. From what I am looking up, it seems as though I do not need any more schooling or certifications. Is that correct? Also, I was wondering if you had a step-by-step guide to creating a portfolio. I was going to help my friend, who is an immigration lawyer, design her website and use that as launching my portfolio sample. What do you think? Thanks in advance, and thank you for the advice. Tim, there's a lot of places we can go with this one. Would you like to take a crack at the beginning, and then I'm sure we're going to go into a lot of directions from there?
Sure. Yeah. And having done this process myself, I taught K-12 for 15 years. Also teaching graduate courses at the same time before I even knew that instructional design was even a career path for me. But my first advice is start developing assets for your classroom. Start with what you already have. And he or she doesn't say what subject matter they teach or what grade level, but it doesn't matter. If you teach kindergarten, make a cool YouTube video about, the alphabet or about sounding out your vowels, or a math video. Create a Kahoot or some kind of Pear Deck kind of interactive experience that your kids can do on the whiteboard or things like that. Start building things that your students can do, and then just take those pieces and that demonstrate your skills, right? That's what a portfolio is meant to do. It's meant to demonstrate and illustrate skills. So start with what you have and start doing things that are going to benefit you both in your current position, and then you'll start over time collecting this portfolio of things that you built a classroom website or things like that. So that's where I would start as a teacher transitioning into ID. Implement your ideas in your own, because you've got the benefit of being an ID, a SME, and a developer, and having a captive audience, right there. You have the microcosm of all instructional design right in your classroom. So build and practice and build up that portfolio just with that stuff. Even if it's just, like I said, kindergarten, third grade stuff, that's stuff. It still demonstrates a capacity. And then it's up to you later on to make that connection of, hey, I built all these things and I can do the same for your university program as well, or for your corporate training or whatever it is.
It totally makes sense. And the thing that I thought about when I first read this question is because the overarching question too, but I want to make sure that I definitely do touch upon, is that it was this like, do I go back to school? Do I need certifications? Do I need the whatever? And the thing is that once again, there is no absolute answer to say, yes, you need the thing, or no, you don't need the thing. It's very much, in my opinion, a preference for the person. But it really also comes down to, as far as for how do you actually like to learn and knowing yourself? So because the thing is that, and as you know, as you've gone through this process yourself too, it's just like, if you want to go and Google or YouTube and read anything online for free from all fantastic resources, you can. You can teach yourself anything online for free. Mm-hmm. So I see some people on LinkedIn feeling like very strongly like against school or academies or certs or something. And it's just like, right. But if that person knows themselves well enough to say like, I know I'm going to struggle. I need someone to hold me accountable. I really need guidance because I'm lost. I'm confused. It's like, well, then there's your answer. If you want to go down that path, you can. But once again, if you've already been doing this for 10 years, you probably already have, I'm assuming, a degree in education or something related. You already have, as Tim mentioned, all of these different forms of samples and things you can start to create. Then you'll be totally fine. It's not like you must go get a master's if you prefer and you want to do that. I would never stop you, but that's just something to always consider. I'm always thinking about the return on investment. Mm-hmm. Like the ROI as the person. Like if you go back to school, is it really going to help you in the long run? Do you foresee what you want to be able to do, or all the jobs that you are looking at say that you need X, Y, Z certification, degree, qualification, whatever? Then okay. But right. I've known plenty of people who have not, and they've transitioned from teaching into instructional design and work at some incredible organizations right now. And what it really took was, as you were talking about, building out that portfolio, really showcasing what it is that they can really do, and they were able to do amazing things. Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah.
And like I said, it's up to us to demonstrate skills and experience and to make the connection of how that's applicable in the job we're applying for. If your portfolio or your resume doesn't demonstrate, or the skills and experience don't fill everything, then that's where more training comes in. Get that master's degree. That's a great way to get more skills and more training and more experience. And like you said, there are sometimes benchmarks, minimums that you have to hit on a job application. I've applied for a job before where I felt like I could do a great job, and one specific minimum requirement I didn't meet, and I didn't click the box on the application, and I didn't even get an interview. And I thought I could have just clicked the box and I would have at least got an interview. So it's up to us to figure that out. What are the skills and experiences we can demonstrate? What are those that we can't? And how do we fill those gaps? And someone, like you said, someone that already has a master's degree in education probably doesn't need another master's degree, but maybe maybe an ID certification if their master's degree wasn't in ed tech or wasn't in curriculum development or something along those lines. Again, there's so much, the Venn diagram of instructional design, e-learning, curriculum design, all these things is so complex. So just, figure out if there are gaps, then fill them with something, either a degree or a training or an internship or other things. Like you said, go learn. And again, it comes mostly down to that portfolio. We've hired people recently that had a great portfolio, even though they didn't have as many degrees as somebody else, because they showed that they could do the work, and that they showed that their work had something to it, that there was a level of quality or a certain perspective or things like that too. So yeah, I'd focus on building that portfolio, and if you need to supplement your training, supplement your training.
Absolutely. So 2 comments to that. The first is that I'm right there with you for like, I've applied to jobs where I was like, I am so good. I'm so perfect for this job. And then because we're going through like ATS and everything, but I didn't click on the box, but they're like, nope. And I was like, but I promise, I swear I can do it. Yeah. Like, it's like, and it was an instant denial email too. It was like, it immediately came back. I was like, it's been 5 minutes. Like, are you serious? Yeah. So yeah, it's always kind of interesting. So for all of you who keep on applying, and then like you get like those instant denials, we've all been there. It's okay. Keep on going. It's unfortunately a part of that process. And also for portfolios too, because we've definitely hired instructional designers over the years on the team as well. And I am confident in telling you that, like, I will, if you submit your resume to me and there's a link in the portfolio or a section in there, I will 100% dive on into that. And if that trumps whatever else, I'm going with that. Like that is the thing that I really care about. And also on the flip side, if your portfolio is just a screenshot with no explanation of anything, then I'm like, I have no clue what I'm looking at. So when you think about a portfolio, because they ask too about like a guide for what's in a portfolio. And there's definitely, once again, there's plenty of things on YouTube and Google that you can go and find. But mainly just to like break things down really quick is that I want to see your mindset around a project from start to finish, from the very, very beginning, as far as we're talking about going through with the research, the analysis, defining the problem, and then coming up with your solution, and then figuring out exactly how you design the overall thing. What were the methodologies? What were you thinking about from a learning strategy perspective, philosophy, going through of how you develop that one. And then from there, talking about not just the build, but also the evaluation. What were the results? What were the learnings? What were the findings? What would you do differently the next time? And then you can show me all the cool bells and whistles and like how it actually looks and works and stuff like that. But I care so much more about the back end and the inner workings of things. Like, that's what I want to read and hear and see. And then if you make it into the interview phase and we're asking you about your portfolio, like, we're going to talk about that. It is 100% going to come up where if you're walking us through something, we can say, like, tell us more. Like, how did you create that? What did you do here? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do X? Like, that's the talking point that's going to get you to open up and get people to actually look at you in a much closer lens and say, like, oh, they really know what they're doing. I can see what's going on here. Yes, that would fit onto the team. We do similar things and things like that. So that's what I would advise for a portfolio piece.
Yeah, I like the idea of an annotated portfolio. So even if it is just screenshots, then maybe call out bubbles or maybe captions on things or mouse over things and pop-ups, or keep it simple and just do like a screencast where you walk through and talk about things. But I like what you said about focusing on the problem solution kind of dynamic. Here's the problem we had, here's how we solved it, or here's a challenge we had, here's how we solved it. Shows a lot about your mindset and the way you approach that.
Right, exactly. That I want the mindset. I want to know the inner workings of how this all came to be, because unfortunately, I've reviewed portfolios before where someone will just send me a screenshot of something in Canva, and I'm like, okay, and
what did you do here? Yeah,
right. I don't. It's like cool.
Did you find
picture.
All these stock images, or did you do the photography yourself?
Right.
Or
I was like, I have no clue what this means. Like, please help me understand. And then, of course, if you are going through with, trying to actually apply, and then obviously you only have your own perspective because you're applying and you're going through with things, like much like I was saying. They're like, oh, I'm perfect for the job and blah, blah, blah. But you don't know on the back end is that probably 90 other people applied to the same job. Right. So now they're really trying to look through those nitty gritty details to say, like, what makes this person stand out? And of course, if your portfolio really does showcase your skill set, your mindset, and everything you can do, that's so much better compared to just being like, I have blah, 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 and on your resume and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, we just went through a hiring process for a media designer, not an ID, but it was surprising to me how many of the portfolios looked just all the same. I mean, they were fine. The work was good, but it all looked the same. And then there were like 3 that stood out, and those were the 3 we interviewed.
Yep, there you go. It makes plenty of sense. And what I'll do as well too is that I'll as I'm popping up the link, I'm making a little note for myself. What I can do is that I'll include in the notes for this show, by the way, that I've been working with a colleague, Alla, and she has been absolutely crushing it with her portfolio, and it looks outstanding. It goes through the steps that Tim and I talked about today on the show. So I'll be sure to link that down below so that way you can actually see an example of what something looks like, where if I was the hiring manager for you and I saw that, I'd be like, ooh, like, what is that? Like, let me dive on in. So that way, folks have a visual and they can go through things.
The Dear Instructional Designer podcast also has a whole. Did she do a whole season on building your portfolio or a series?
Oh yeah, that so whole thing's amazing.
A great resource to dig into.
Oh yeah, that entire podcast is incredible. There's like 50 something episodes, I think, maybe more. I don't recall. It's been a while, but since I listened to that podcast, but that one is a stellar podcast to be able to listen to. And then the other thing I was going to say, if you wanted a real life scenario around this too, there is our podcast episode with Saide and Eric, and she talks about how she reached out to Eric in order for her to be able to get a portfolio piece done because of the fact that he kept posting on LinkedIn about trying to help people to transition out of academia into the corporate world. And he kept on making LinkedIn posting after posting. And finally, she was just like, hey, can I help you make a training around this instead? And they came on the podcast to talk about how their working relationship came to be, the communication, how things actually worked from a project management standpoint. So if you were working with a friend, which is what it sounds like that this person described, is that they're going to be working with a friend potentially on this type of a new on a new project. Well, then that way, that's something else you can actually think about too, as far as you're hearing more about what they did, what worked, what communication really came into be, and also what didn't work. Because I asked them too, I was just like, so like, where did things fall off the rails? Because like, I want to know what actually happened. How did you fix those problems while still making sure that you are being, polite and appropriate and all that good stuff. So they dive into that. So I'll include that into the notes as well too.
And I like the idea of him working on this law website. But one of my note there was this only demonstrates a single subset of skills, right? It might demonstrate your web design, your UX design, the ability to see from the user's experience, maybe some graphic design and typography maybe, or but it doesn't show anything about learning science. It doesn't show anything about e-learning tools or maybe interactions or online interactions or those kind of things too. So it definitely could be part of your portfolio, and if that's the first part of your portfolio, great. But then try to identify what needs to supplement that.
Absolutely. All right. That's an excellent end to question 3. And now comes question 4, Tim. And this is the one that I've spent so much time researching. I was like, this is not easy trying to figure out how to go down and go. So I'm really curious to actually hear what you said about this one, because I have my own thoughts and feelings on here. And apologies to everyone before I read this question, because there's a lot of names on here. I'm going to try to shorten them because I am the worst when it comes to pronouncing names. So I'm just going to horrifically butcher everyone's name. So
I'm going to speak for Luke and say they'll probably be in the show notes.
Yes, they will. 100%. I'm not going to attempt all of these names. Okay, here is the question. It says, hey, Luke, I saw your post about wanting questions for your podcast, and I've got one. I'm working on a project looking at effective design for online discussion boards at the graduate level and came across a different measurement scale, interaction analysis model, or short it is IAM. Have you ever heard of it? So far, I found 2 papers that refer to it: Constructing Student Knowledge in the Online Classroom, The Effectiveness of Focal Prompts, and The Effect of Structured Divergent Prompts on Knowledge Construction. The authors in both papers make the point that using Bloom's taxonomy as a measurement scale isn't as reliable as the IAM scale. Do you have any experiences with the IAM scale? Is it really more reliable than Bloom's at determining and measuring critical thought level of student posts? So Tim, this one's wild. This one is like really diving into the instructional design world, where I saw that. The first thing I actually thought about was this, like, wow, this is so awesome that someone has the opportunity to really go down this rabbit hole. Like, that was the first thing where I was just like, this means that the institution or the organization like really believes in doing the best. They care. They want the latest and greatest. So this actually made me really happy as far as for that goes. Then came the pain of trying to figure out how to answer this. So I'm not. Do you want to take this one first, or would you like me to give this thing a spin?
Sure. Yeah. So the IAM is there's some loaded questions there and some interesting concepts. The short answer is no. I've never heard of it before. I've never used it, but I love digging into these articles, and then you also supplied a third article, which I thought was a great way of gave a good framework of it. So I'm hoping that'll be in the notes too.
Absolutely.
But the more I process this, and again, this is me looking into this for the first time, so completely new perspective. But the more I process this, it's almost to me an apples and oranges kind of comparison when you're talking about Bloom's versus this framework. What the IAM is intended to do, from what I could tell, it's a tool for measuring the level of interaction in an online environment. Okay, so it's specifically about measuring the interaction itself, the depth of the interaction, the quality of the interaction, and it provides these 5 levels of interaction. Level 1, sharing and comparing. Level 2, dissonance. Level 3, negotiation and co-construction. Level 4, testing, tentative constructions. And level 5, statement and application of newly constructed knowledge. And I really liked this idea because always I've talked with colleagues before about improving discussion boards. We're always trying to get past that third step of here's my thought, and then someone says, yeah, that's nice, or no, you're wrong. Or how do you get to that third level of let's start now trying to get to this level, negotiation and co-construction. So this fell right in line with my experience about discussion boards and my desire to get discussions better. And so I really, really like this framework. I'm gonna be using this more for sure. But it is specifically a framework for analyzing the depth of those interactions, not the content behind it. And my thought was, I could read 10 papers, synthesize and analyze the content there, come up with a brand new learning theory. And if I state that on a discussion board, that's a level 1 interaction. So I've done, the tippy top of Bloom's, construction, analysis, creation, but that's still just a level 1 IAM interaction. Until someone comes in and says, I don't think that's right. Have you thought about it this way? Okay, that's a level 2 interaction. Then when I say, okay, here's what I really meant, or, I hadn't thought about it that way, maybe it's this. Now we're getting to negotiation and co-construction, which is a level 3 interaction. So it's a different thing. It's there to measure the quality of the tool you're using, really, the quality of that discussion itself.
And going off of that, it's also tricky to really know what people actually mean and say and do within a discussion board section, because it's from the outside looking in, because I know I read a bunch of different papers around this too that was talking about literally like downloading the transcripts of the course and analyzing that. And it's just like, well, like how much did you really understand because you're the outsider looking in? Like if you had the conversation with the person, you may have perceived and interpreted things differently compared to the instructor, compared to another student. So there's a lot of wiggle room where once again, I love the idea. like, I think it's great for us to be able to say, hey, we can make these things better. Let's talk about these different types of phases and really try to see how can we make a richer, fuller, more meaningful conversation in a discussion board. That's awesome. So like, I really do like this, even though I'm kind of like poo-pooing it, but like, I really love the idea of things. But the other big thing to me that I kept on thinking about, because I've taken online courses for forever, I've taught graduate courses for years too, and what I know is that if I really was going to say, like, I'm doing this research, I want to make sure I'm going to dive on into everything and whatnot, I really need to understand the student's perception about discussion boards specifically for that course, that institution, and same thing with the professor's perceptions about discussion boards, because we have all been there where people go into a discussion board and they're like, all right, cool, this is 2% of my grade, I need 2 paragraphs, you got it. And they just start typing away because it's not weighted to say this is half your grade. So they're going to spend more of their time doing the full-blown assignments and essays and projects and whatnot and so forth, because that's natural to do. Because if you bomb all the discussion boards and you still get a 90% of the class, whatever, you know, like,
where's my motivation?
Right. Exactly. So that level of motivation has to be there. And of course you have grad students, which is I think grad students are the right pilot to do this, because typically other adults care about this communication, the connectivism, like they should be caring about the discussion. So I think it's a really good way for us to be able to pilot, see how it goes, find the right instructors as well too, who really would be able to support this and partner with the instructional designers, because once again, I've taught grad courses and I am confident in telling you that if I am trying to go and do my announcements, do my grading, and then on top of that, try to contribute to half the discussion board posts per week, I'm looking at 30 hours a week. Like, and if that's what you're trying to be able to say is like, we want richer conversations, really do this, really do that. It's like, I get it, but we also need to think about the realistic perspective is that if these are adjunct instructors, if they're making $2,200, $2,500 for a 10-week course, really, like, are they going to say like, I'd love to spend more time and have like a deeper conversation of a discussion board? Like, I don't know. So I think it's more about perceptions and reality than it is as much about like, hey, this sounds great, but we need the right circumstances to really test it out.
Right.
Does that make sense?
We need to provide our students the right circumstances as well. I think one of the biggest issues that this brought up for me was we don't ever give our students enough time to get past. If we can get to that third level, that's amazing. We don't give them enough time because too often we treat a discussion board as an assignment, a task that has a certain amount of time, like it's week 2 discussion board, or it's the discussion board for chapter 9, you know, and as soon as we move on to chapter 10, the chapter 9 discussion board is irrelevant anymore. And it really made me think about, you know, maybe it would be fun to try a model where the discussion board lasted all the term, right? So that you could get past level 2, level 3, and maybe discussion boards are just for topics, and throughout the course, those topics can continue to develop and mature. And now that I have like an actual tangible framework that I can print out and staple onto my board and look at all day, you know, that sets that goal of I'd really like to see a student get to, or a class get to level 5 interactions on a discussion board. That would be amazing, but that's going to take time. That's going to take 2-3 weeks. Because it's really about those cycles. When we have people in a room together, the amount of cycles that happen, communication cycles that happen, are huge. I mean, even in this conversation, we've had maybe 100 or more back and forth cycles of ideas and questions and things like that. In a discussion board, that would take a month to have that equivalent conversation. And we just don't give our students that amount of time.
No, because they need that time to also build those relationships too. Like they don't know each other yet. So when I think about like, oh, like, are you hitting the negotiation stage? Well, it's like, well, if I don't know this person at all, no, I'm not. No, that's not appealing to me.
Are they going to take it wrong, or you know,
right? Yeah. Am I going to get a complaint against me because I'm debating against this person, and now we're fighting, quote unquote, in a discussion board, and it's really weird and awkward and tense? Like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, but of course it's this like, oh no, I've known this person now for 8 weeks and we've had a bunch of calls together. We've gone through things together. Then like, yeah, I'm not afraid to push back because I will respectfully do so. And they know me, they know my style. It's not going to catch someone by surprise, which also makes me think too entirely about like, is a discussion board enough? Because I don't think so. If I really wanted to do this model, it would be like, yeah, we're going to have a discussion board, but also we're going to do weekly workshops or trainings or webinars or something where we're going to be coming together as a group and working together, either in person, Zoom, Gather Town, whatever, something video-ish.
Yeah, or how do you get one discussion board to bleed into the next so that it instead of starting over each week, it can somehow evolve. And that's one of the things I like. Some of these platforms like ADDIE or Packback that kind of allow for ADDIE, especially, is modeled after Facebook. It's one board that students interact with each week throughout the term. And so it could allow students to continue a thread that started in week 1 throughout, if they're engaged in that topic or engaged in that thread. The other thing that stood out to me too was this idea of dissonance being an advanced form of communication. That we hear a lot about the algorithms in our social media that funnel us toward people that agree with us, right? That's typically the idea in YouTube or in Facebook or things like that, is that we are funneled toward places that we will agree and engage, because engagement's the key there, right? And this idea of dissonance is an interesting one. And I know that there's one platform, I think it's Ment.io, that is using AI in their discussion board platform specifically to create some dissonance. Like their AI will try to, I don't know exactly how it works. I saw a demo one time. I haven't used it myself, but will try to put in front of you posts or comments that might seem not in alignment with your own.
Interesting.
So then instead of funneling you towards agreement, it kind of funnels you toward disagreement or toward this area of dissonance to get you to that next level. So I thought that was an interesting use of AI within a discussion board. I'm really intrigued by how some of these companies are starting to use AI in their discussion board platforms.
Oh yeah, 100%. If someone can actually do that, and I'm literally looking at this like right now on the side, so that's interesting. I'm going to dive into that, and I'll link that into the show notes as well. The other thing that this completely reminds me of too is, did you ever take a debate class before in college?
I never did.
So I've taken a few. And I'm confident in telling you that like week 1 is really weird because you're like, I don't know these people, whatever. And then, of course, like the first class I had, it was we went through all the typical debates that you would think about. And of course, the professor would say like, what side are you on, A or B? And then like whatever hand that you raised up for, he was like, awesome, you're on the opposite side. Congrats. Like, go fight with yourself. And you're like,
right.
Cool. Now I have to see the other perspective and debate myself and try to convince other people. And I remember one of the ones that we were talking about was something like lowering the drinking age to like 18 is like what I had. And I was all like the opposite. I was like, no, we shouldn't lower the drinking age. And of course they were like, congrats, you're on the other side. And I was like, okay, here we go. And that really had a deeper conversation because I was debating with my fellow classmates about these things. And, and some people were vulnerable and open about different things, about how like these different forms of substances like affected their lives or their loved ones or whatnot. And so like it created this huge thing where I was like, whoa, like I thought this is a surface level debate. We're not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, all these stories came about and these emotions, and it was like, oh, okay. So, but of course, once again, that was over a period of time. It was assigning you a belief, and you had to go against one thing. So it's like I can see this working, but it needs the time. It needs that continuation that you've been talking about, the platform, the trust. It needs a lot to be able to do it. But once again, I love the idea. It just, you really need a lot of the right circumstances. But I think it's cool. I think it's worthy of testing for sure. Yeah.
The other thing I like about this, you probably heard the phrase that which gets measured improves, right? Just the act of measuring something or being consciously aware or being able to put a number to something changes the way we approach it. I think that just more awareness of this framework would have that kind of effect. Now that I can look and point to, like I said, a framework of interactions, it kind of gives me a goal to work toward, and it makes it a little more concrete. So I'm really appreciative of whoever asked this question. Thank you. I learned a lot, and it's made me think about the discussion boards a little bit different. But I really do think, to wrap it up, it is kind of apples and oranges. Blooms, we often throw out the word blooms and we leave off all the rest of the words, right? Bloom's taxonomy of learning is really about putting a framework or a way to measure an individual's learning, right? And this is not that. This is measuring the depth of an interaction. So
Absolutely.
Two different things, kind of related. I'm not sure why those articles would try to pair them against each other when they're just different tools for different purposes.
Yeah, that great point. That was something I found interesting too. I was like, why the need of comparison? But because it's plenty great on its own. Why are we trying to bring down other people? That's, it's kind of like how you're reading about an instructional design model, and then you're like, cool, like I love using backward design. This works for me. And then someone's going to come in here and then just like kick down the door and be like, have you heard of SAM? And you're like, yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. Like it's fine. Like what's the problem here? Like why do we need to fight about it? It's anyway, but that's a different story for a different day. Tim, this was awesome, man. This was fun.
This was great.
Yeah, I absolutely love doing this. I would hope that you would come back in the future to do more Q&A episodes, because this was really cool. I learned a lot, not just from hearing from you, but once again, that last question, I was reading like journal after journal article going through things where I was like, where is this going to stop? Like it's like going back in grad school trying to learn all these things new. It was fun, man. It was really cool. I had a great time. Tim, the final question I have for you is, where can folks go to find you, connect with you, see what you do? Where do you want them to be able to connect with you?
Oh, TimothyMcKean.com is my name, and my website for audiobook and e-learning samples there. Also have a channel on YouTube. Don't post there too often anymore, but find me on your Facebook group and around. Everything is just based on my name. So look up Timothy McKean and you'll find it.
Awesome. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes so they can easily access it. But Tim, hey, once again, thanks for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was a ton of fun. Also, a big thank you to Tim once again for coming on the show. If you have a question that you want featured on the podcast, write to me. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and of course, email luke@drlukehobson.com. I can be reached by pretty much anyway, so find me, ask your question, and we'll love to have this come on the show and bring on more guests, other expertise, better perspectives to keep on diving on in and really unpack this entire instructional design field. If you like this video, if you like this podcast episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel, and of course, to comment down below and tell us what you thought about this episode. Any surprises that came about, or did you have a different take on any of our questions and any of our answers? But hey, folks, that is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there. I'll talk to you next time.